there was one question on the Zoom. Nate from the first talk asked, apologies if I missed this information during the talk. When crawling the top 1 million websites from the Trenco list, did you also probe/crawl URLs from similar domains that can be found on the main page? If not, can we assume that if a prototype pollution vulnerability is found on a given domain, it is going to be carried on all the URLs in the same domain?
So in terms of similar URLs, I'm sorry, so is the author present or on Zoom?
On Zoom. So,
Okay.
Nate, if you want to unmute, you can ask the question directly.
So in terms of,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so basically what I was asking is, you said that you crawled the top 1 million website from the Tronco list. And I was just wondering that if you found that there is a prototype pollution vulnerability on some website, is it for sure going to be present on other URLs from the same website? So, because basically what we see on the Tronco top 1 million is usually the main pages and not sub-pages of a given domain.
oh yes, we indeed cross the sub-pages as well as the main pages. So actually, we write some JavaScript Chrome extensions to actually automatically find the clickable links on that main pages, and then the JavaScript will automatically click that link. Then the page will navigate to a friendly new sub-pages. So
Okay.
yeah. So basically, we set about 10 to 15 sub-pages for each seed website, and then we also discover the contributions both. For about half of the cases, we discover the contribution both on the main pages and the sub-pages. However, there are indeed some cases that they only appear on the sub-pages, but not on the main pages. So if you are interested in my the main Ndss presentation, so actually I have mentioned that on borderboss.com, where the vulnerability only appear in the sub-pages, but not on the main page.
Okay, thank you so much. That was very interesting.
Thank you.
So it's 1:15, but we're going into a break. It's a 30-minute break. So I think we'll take about 5 minutes to go ahead and ask some questions. It looks like Jim has a question, and I've got at least 10 questions here. I won't ask all of them, but perhaps we can ask some.
Hi, so I guess I'm supposed to watch the camera, right? So Jim Ellis, University of Idaho. The question was, you did all your crawling as a Chrome extension. Are there inherent limitations or dangers in doing this instead of having a standalone tool? You're using Chrome to do all the crawling, all the exporting for you. One, I think that would slow things down. But two, could that be attacked and mess up your experimental setup?
We do some trials to actually prevent that dangerous. Yeah, we do acknowledge that the JavaScript extensions could bring some kind of vulnerabilities, but we in terms of both the input-export generators in our system as well as the JavaScript extensions, our coding are trying to kind of reduce the real damage dealt to the real world websites. So yes, I think that's a very good and important issue for us to to paying attention to. Yeah, thank you for this question.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. While others are contemplating questions, let me ask you this: How many websites are there?
So
in total,
you mean for the
entire internet? How many websites?
Oh yeah, that's a very good question. We don't know because from our what we can see right there is kind of what does it call? Kind of a service web, and then we have also the dark web right there. So mainly the portion right there could be 1 over 9. Namely, and 90% of the websites lying in the dark web. So I think that's very hard to.
So I Googled it, right? Google is the font of all knowledge.
Oh, cool.
And I mean, whether you trust this source or not, it said 1.93 billion websites. But I was curious, it was sort of the setup for how did you pick the 1 million that you probed?
Oh, sure. It's like, so we have some official website lists right there, and we kind of, our experience could be like we always use those website lists to actually do the large-scale crawling, such as the Alexa and the Tranco lists that we are using here. Yeah.
Okay. A question at the microphone?
Yeah, Samuel Giroux, MIT Lincoln Laboratory. My question is, looking at your results, I noticed you have like almost 1,500 vulnerabilities or so that you classify as no observable impact. And I'm curious what that means, like how that's distinct from false positive, why you're sure that this is a vulnerability and not a false positive, and those kind of
Oh, yeah,
things.
of course. Thanks. And first, we want to say that proto is already a vulnerability. It's like it has some damages to the JavaScript functions. However, it's for the vulnerabilities that we consider that it has no further consequences. Instead of the false positives, it's like they are doing some damages to the JavaScript functions, but not further damages such as cross-site scripting, because we know that cross-site scripting is kind of can execute any malicious script right there, but the contribution cannot. However, the JavaScript functionalities could also be kind of damages such as like there could be like some of the pictures are not displayed right there, and we consider that that is not as severe as some further consequences, but it did have some real damages to the websites. And well, I want to mention another aspect. Sorry for that. And the other aspect is like although that it has no observable consequence right there, we observe that there could be some vulnerable code snippets that can be added by the third party when that website are being updated or migrated to some brandly new frameworks, and then the further consequences could be brought into, like the cross-site scripting or some manipulations such as this. So we would like to we would like to inform the website owners that collaboration could has a probability to actually lead to that further consequences, because it opens up a backdoor for the adversaries to inject malicious code. Although it could not be taking place right now, but it could have some potentials in the future. So that's how we consider it.
Sure, thanks. Not to take away from all your 10 questions or so, but another question. You spent a lot of time talking about how you were using this really old version of Chrome, I think, coming from this prior work. I wonder, does that obviously that old version of Chrome causes you a lot of complications at some points. Does that impact the results? Would using a new version of Chrome potentially mitigate some of these vulnerabilities possibly? Would it introduce new ones? Is that something you were concerned about at all?
Oh, I see. I think that's a very good point for us to move forward. So basically, our results. Let me consider that. Sorry. For the result validation module, we validate that vulnerability on the brandly new version of Chromium.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, this is quite interesting. I'm going to just real quick mention my questions, but then we'll break and we can talk about it during the break or possibly on Slack channel. But the one thing that occurred to me is I really like the fact that you did some intermediate experimentation. You came up with experimental results. You sort of, tested your system to see how effective it was and then worked to improve it over time. I also like the case studies aspect of the work. So you conducted the case studies and benefited from that. It doesn't, many researchers might not realize it. You develop a probing capability like this, and then if you're going to use it to evaluate in the real world on 1 million websites, that's a lot of websites. And then once you go out and you probe all those, when you find problems, you now have the responsibility to do the disclosure And that's not necessarily an easy process. Like you said, you weren't able to identify contact information for a large number of those websites. So I assume there was an IRB involved since you were going out and experimenting in the real world. So I'd be curious to know. And again, we can talk about this offline. What were some of the questions or challenges or issues that may or may not have been raised by the IRB? And then finally, in the paper, it said 2,738 vulnerabilities. Here, I think you said 2,917. So the list is growing. You said 185 of the 2,738 had been fixed. Do they notify you, or do you go back and verify? And that seems like a very low number that have been fixed. So anyway, those are my questions. But in the interest of time, let's go ahead and stop for the break, and we can chat more about it